Alright, how y'all doing? For this book review, we're going to go through Darrell Schweitzer's We Are All Legends. This is a nice little small book of 12 short stories illustrated by, for the cover and the interior art by Sir Fabian, with introduction by L. Sprague de Camp, and Wildside Press in case you're interested in that. I know I don't go too over with publishers. But I say that because this is still in publication. You don't have to worry about getting secondhand there. It's $15 for the paperback, and if I recall, $30, basically double that for a hardcover. So, why am I mentioning this? Well, I found this out from another YouTuber, and I'll explain that later. And it's one of those books you should have on your shelves if you were into heroic fantasy, sword and sorcery, and stuff like that. So, let's talk about it. For this review, I'll tell you the summation of the first story, and I'll briefly glance over the other stories, hopefully without giving too much away. The setting of the stories here take place in our world and a fantasy version of it. The first story is The Hag, and that's where we are introduced with our main character throughout all these, Sir Julian, who's a young knight. Now, he's about to get ready to help somebody with a feast of an upcoming wedding, so he joins in this fellow hunting party. And he comes across, they find this boar, and as they're chasing the boar into a supposedly enchanted forest, he gets separated from the hunting group by himself. He, while still hunting the boar, but separated from his party, he finds this old, decrepit mansion. And then he stays there for a while. Now, as he's resting, he finds out throughout the night that this place is a bit cursed. He wakes up, and then all of a sudden the house is surrounded by rats, and then also then afterwards serpents and a huge cyclone, and then through it all, an old hag comes by and says, "Oh, a guest in my home. Well, you must help for my hospitality. You must give me some favors here." And we'll give you the details of that. He had no choice. She can overpower him, and after his favors to her, he wakes up next to her, and she's this beautiful young woman. And she tells him her story, that this mansion was her family's, and they were damned by the people when they chosen a new god of the land, but they refused. And afterwards, she gave her soul up to Satan, who gave her her powers and so forth, but also the means of making her beautiful, but only in his presence, by his touch. And of course, Lucifer says that if another person takes my place, he can help reverse that, but he will become mine. So that's what she ended up doing. She told this knight that now that with the favors that she's done and making her beautiful, his soul now belongs to Satan. So this coming night, he has to come up and challenge him, or at least do as he says. Reluctant at first, because despite the fact he was a knight, he does cherish his life and all that in ways. He's not a coward, but he doesn't just throw it away on instant every time there's an opportunity. But eventually he agrees, and the next night he meets up with Satan. And Satan tells him as such. Let me read you the passage in that part here. Let's see. "She has done well," he said, "and I am pleased. Her purpose is served, and I release her. Now you, Sir Julian, are mine. But I shall not take you now. You will come to me in your own way and at your own time, but still you will come. For now I command you, live, wander, and see all the strange world in my name." And so he does. And that's when the next series of stories come in. In the next 11 stories there deals with his various adventures and finding all sorts of dangerous monsters along the way, or other enchanters or what have you. And he finds out that the world that he thought is not what he thought. So there's more to it than just God and Lucifer. There's things in between, and some of them are just where he comes across in areas where he, as a knight, may be useful to get him out of a situation. And there are some stories where they may give him an opportunity to get him out of his predicament of being out of Lucifer's hands, or maybe redeemed or something like that. So. And they come, for instance, in the next story, he comes to this fountain, this beautiful fountain in the middle of nowhere, and he comes across this gorgeous woman, and they fall in love. But but is she all that she appears to be? Or how about the Island of Faces, where trying to rescue a girl he fell in love with as a child, who but now is missing and all that. He goes on a journey, and his ship and gets shipwrecked, and he's now on an island where there's faces everywhere. Comes across a castle with a wizard, and who was making plans, very universal plans, so to speak, and needs his help for it. And another story where a Vale pool of Mistorak, where there's this pool that by giving it a proper payment, he would see maybe find a way to get out of his predicament. It's being damned out of Lucifer's hands. That adventure cost him his left hand. He has to wear a hook from there on out. And now another story where he's hired as a knight to stop a witch, and this he comes across this beautiful enchanted forest. He's wondrous and peaceful and all that, and he comes across the village, and the village says, "Hey, this witch has been causing us problems." All the trouble witches give villagers and all that they blame him for. But is she a witch, and what will happen if he defeats her? One of the stories that intrigued me was the Castle of Kites and Crows, where Sir Julian, finding refuge in a lord's house, and during the festivities, a red knight comes by and challenges and defeats many of the knights in that castle. And he points to Sir Julian and says, "You're the one I'm after here, but I will challenge you at my castle. You will find it through by following the kites and crows." And he travels there and finds out what his purpose for that challenge is. Very reminiscent of Sir Gawain the Green Knight, but a different ending here. And we also got a story of the Riddle of the Horn, where trying to push through a blizzard while being chased, Sir Julian finds himself in the castle of the Ice King, who challenges him in a game of riddles. In Diver's Hands, finding a castle in the middle of a city, very superstitious of a particular word called Nekatu. The lord of this castle is offering Julian a brand new left hand, but what's the cost in that? And the unknown god cried out. That's a story where a friend of Sir Julian, a young man who's getting he's starting his life about found a love there, is about to get married, but he ends up missing. So he talks to a witch, and the witch tells him, you go and cry out to the unknown god. He will help you with this. First of all, who's his unknown god? How can he help him find his friend? And what can this unknown god give him out of his predicament, if he can? And let's see, into the dark lands, where Sir Julian has this dream about a hooded rider and a lady in white. And eventually he finds this hooded rider and follows him into this very mysterious city that travels through space and time. And he is hired to find, to rescue the future queen that's held captive. And there's a few other stories about this, and it comes again about what sort of adventure that he can he help him when he's hired to do something. And again, he's not a coward, but he's like, he doesn't want to be thrown into every situation where he's not going to die for the littlest things, especially with his soul now belonging to Satan. But he'll do what he can as a knight, and he usually gets out of this. And now it comes to question: how much more does he have to do with this? Can he have his soul released from Satan, or does it matter? Of course, I could describe the writing style of this, but I think I'll give a reading of L. Sprague de Camp's 1980s talk about in his introduction here. This collection of 12 short story fantasies by Darrell Schweitzer, one of the brightest and rising generation of fantasists, reminds the fantasy reader of Lord Dunsany, George Branch Cabal, Michael Moorcock, and perhaps George MacDonald, author of the Victorian adult fantasies Phantastis and Lilith. But Schweitzer is his own man and not an obvious imitator of anyone. MacDonald, although in his dream narratives he explores many worlds of fantasy, remains basically a devout 19th century British Christian. He had, in fact, been a congregational minister before retiring from his post to devote himself to writing. Schweitzer, on the other hand, belongs to the skeptical, uncertain, pessimistic, polydogmatic 20th, where people believe 6 impossible things before breakfast and nothing at all in that afternoon. Schweitzer himself says that although he has read many of the stories of the writers mentioned, the actual inspiration for the tales of Sir Julian consisted mainly of medieval romances and ballads and Ingmar Bergman's motion picture The Seventh Seal. And the thing is, I think about his writing style. His writing style is not, heavy purple prose, but it is enough to give you to give you the sense of the enchanted world he lives in. I would say that when it comes to movies to inspire you for a book like this, if you are into, say, Excalibur or Ridley Scott's Legend, then this is a book for you. And I think you will enjoy to get in that mood. And also another thing that helps is the illustrations by Stephen Fabian. let me show you a slideshow of the illustrations in question.
The illustrations by Stephen Fabian could not be praised more highly. I did a review of House of Wolf by Basil Copper with Fabian's art heading every chapter. This is not the case here, but we are given whole page layouts every so often throughout the book. Unfortunately, there is not a page of art for every story. While few, Fabian's art brings an enchanting mood and atmosphere to the stories. Each piece shows events and character close-ups composed in an Art Nouveau style. While art is not needed for every book, this does keep up with the tradition of the pulps with art associated with it. Okay, if you want to explore more of Stephen Fabian's art, just go to his actual webpage, stephenfabian.com. It's a bit old school as far as web structure, which comes with a flaw, and I'll explain that shortly. So what you do is you go to Gallery, and you can start exploring his artwork. This doesn't have everything he's ever done, but it's a good chunk of it. Now, what you do is you take a look right here. If it's not what you want to look at, just press Show More, and of course it adds more, and it goes further down into the page, what have you, until you find something you can look into. Now, say for instance, you find something you want to see, and let's just say this one right here, and normally you would just left click it, takes you to the next page, and it tells the name of the painting, and afterwards the dark tells him information either about his career or about the drawing or painting itself. You scroll down, take a good look at it, comment, what have you. Now here's where the flaw comes in. You go back a page, it resets the whole page. You gotta go scroll down all again, and this is a very long page of artwork in this format. So what you do is do everything you did before, and say you want to take a look at Agnes de la Fere, and instead of left-clicking it, just right-click it in a new tab, and you can do this with any of the paintings and drawings, and you can get the information without distorting it. Because now, when you go back to the previous tab, it doesn't reset anything. So as long as you don't refresh, as long as you don't left-click it, you should be fine. It's not too much of a hindrance. It may be annoying to some, and it should be better, but what are you going to do? This is the way it's set up. So, for those of you who do like old school artwork, from Dungeons & Dragons to just old paperbacks and magazines, from Frazetta on up, check this site out. You won't be disappointed. It is a very rich source. Although there is a message here about, no images, whole or part for this website we use to express permission, so please ask if you can. So, with that, all right. I hope you take your time to look at this and enjoy.
So, this is a book I definitely want to recommend to you all, especially if you're into the old school heroic fantasy, sword and sorcery, epic fantasy stories, that tradition of, Conan and all theirs that follow after him in some form or fashion. Now, how much I will recommend this, I'm sure that if, the thing is, these stories were written between 70 and 81 before they were collected into this volume that you see here. If they were written and collected, say, before in the early 70s, and Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, read it, and he would have placed this in his Appendix N. Appendix N is his list of fantasy stories, and gives the players of Dungeons & Dragons the idea of what type of game you would be playing when you're doing Dungeons & Dragons. They include the works of Paul Anderson, The Broken Sword, which I covered. You could say Conan, of course. Works of L. Sprague de Camp, Michael Moorcock, and what have you. You can find this list easily online of what to expect. Now, unfortunately, because these were written after that, that wasn't the case. But another company did. People who made this game. This is Black Sword Hack Chaos Edition, and it's produced by Demary Mushman, which is stationed in France. Don't worry about it. If you order it, it takes about a couple weeks, give or take, but bear in mind about holidays that might hinder that. I didn't have to wait long. And when you purchase a hardcover copy, you're given a PDF, so you can look into it. It's a very nice, simple, straightforward game, and it's it's where you want to play games that are in the same realm as Elric or Conan and all that. It's very simple, straightforward. Follows its own rules, not 5e. But here's some of the illustrations that talk. These are fake book covers there that reminiscent of the old paperbacks from the 60s and 70s. But it has its own bibliography of inspirational books that should inspire you in how you play this game. Let me go over it on the lecture part. All right. Now I recognize most of these authors here. The First Law and Shattered Sea trilogies by Joe Abercrombie. And all right. Three Hearts and Three Lions and The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson. I have two versions of The Broken Sword. The Sad Tale of the Brothers Crossbart by Jesse Bullington. Not familiar with that one. Gentlemen of the Road by Michael Chabon. Know the author. Everything by Robert E. Howard. Yes, I mean everyone. It actually says that. Everything, Yeah, so, yes, that includes even his non-fantasy stuff. And when you read El Borak, which I covered, you'll understand why. Let's see. Elephants and Corpses by Cameron Hurley. The Gotrek and Felix series by William King. I read several of those books while he was writing it back, many years ago. The Linkmar series by Fritz Leiber. That's Fafner and Grey Mouser. There. The Elric, Hawkmoon, and Corum story and Irikose series by Michael Moorcock. Have all of them. The Empire of the East series by Fred Saberhagen. I'm familiar with that writer through his sword stories. I never read it, but I just know of that. That's the only work I can remember of his. Disfavored Hero by Jessica Amanda Salmonson. Niftaline by Michael Shea. Good luck trying to get that at a decent price, but that's another video. Rom by Carl Sherrill. We Are All Legends by Darrell Schweitzer. So yes. The Dying Earth series by Jack Vance. The Kane series by Carl E. Wagner. And the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. So he is not unknown, and so I think with that said, if you're a tabletop role player game that if you don't like current D&D and want to go old school and play games like Shadow Arc and all that, and you want inspiration in fiction, pick this up. 12 good written short stories. It doesn't, I find it didn't disappoint at all. So, yeah, I found out about this through the YouTuber All Fiction is Fantasy, which is his offshoot channel from his Dungeon Dive series. Dungeon Dive is where he covers games, but every once in a while he covers the books that he reads. But he didn't decide to make a separate channel talking straight up the books that he buys, his book hauls, and his reviews. In a couple of videos he mentions this, and he couldn't praise it enough. This is where he draws it near the top, if not the top, of how he likes his fantasies. And I got, because of that video, I remember that and decided to get my own copy. Now I'm telling you. And this is how YouTube is wonderful in getting people to understand, what is out there. Because you can't rely on traditional publishers anymore. They don't want to publish this stuff up front, in Barnes & Noble and any major bookstores. You gotta have to start a little bit here, find channels that talk about it, but every once in a while, through those other YouTubers, they mention other works that may get you to look into it. So we go down the rabbit hole in that. Now, before I made this video, I found other videos that talk about there's a huge problem of boys not reading enough. Well, and of course, a lot of these people who work in publishing or some form of fashion, who are writers and all that, they tell you, well, it's because traditional publishing doesn't want to publish books that boys want to read. And here it is. This is a book that's not out of print at the moment I make this video. It is affordable. It is good adventure stories about a tragic hero, and what does he, how he got in his bad situation, what all adventures that he comes across, what near misses of damaging his soul even further, and does he get out if he gets out, and you can, and thing is, most of the stuff you have to find for boys, you gotta go through a used bookstore, and you gotta teach and recommend it, because you can hardly find that in the current bookstores, which is more catering to women and other groups. They don't want to publish for men. I mean, granted, you can go to Barnes & Noble and get Robert Howard's Conan and have it ordered for you, but a lot of times we see on the shelf what attracts us, and through but if there's nothing on the shelf that attracts them to their interest, they're not going to keep publishing that. So, through what few people watch my channel, and me and you seeing other channels of other fantasy books that that's how we kind of keep the tradition alive for everyone to read us, and to keep stories like this going. Because we don't all like the same thing. We'll find our niche, and there's a general trend of what men would like to read and what women like to read, and there's some overlap, but some people are very specific in how we want our stories. Well, that's going off on a tangent here, but digressing a bit, but it's actually quite important. So here you go. We Are All Legends by Darrell Schweitzer. Pick this up, read it, enjoy it. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.